Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carpet City Cinema, a Gila Films podcast. I'm David Weaver, and coming at you in less than 2 weeks from the last episode, Miracle of Miracles. Lots happened in the last week to talk about in the film world. In the Gila Films world specifically, it's kind of along the lines of a little bit more the same. I teased several weeks ago a promotional art piece that we're having commissioned, and that has been completed. But I need to nail down details with a printer before I can really reveal what that is. But follow us on the Facebook page. That'll be your first chance to see that artwork, which really love how it turned out. And I think that people who are fans of our movie and also fans of, how can I put it, the kind of 50s to 80s cinema that has so strongly influenced me will greatly appreciate this art piece when it is completed and unveiled. But today was the Oscar nominations came out for 2024, and kind of, it was pretty much what you'd expect. There wasn't really too many surprises, I didn't think. Leonardo DiCaprio not getting nominated for Killers of the Flower Moon, and Margot Robbie for Barbie as an actress. Those were kind of the only major ones that kind of stood out. But, there's only 5 slots in each acting category. So in a year like this, where you had all these films like Oppenheimer and Poor Things, it's just going to happen that, even someone who you expect to get nominated is just going to kind of get not make the cut. But some interesting things for sure, I think for fans of pop culture and genre cinema, is the fact that we now have officially an Academy Award nominated Godzilla movie. The latest entry from Toho, the original makers of the franchise, Godzilla Minus One, was nominated for Best Visual Effects. So Godzilla movies having been around now this will be the 70th year, 2024, since the original Japanese version of the first Godzilla movie premiered. It's pretty cool to finally see the Big G get some Oscar respect. Also, as a big fan of Jodie Foster, got to shout her out for getting another Oscar nomination, this time supporting actress for Nyad, the biopic. And also to Annette Bening, who got the Best Actress nomination for the film. This is her, I think it's her 5th nomination. She has not won. Jodie's won twice, but I love me some Jodie Foster, so I'm really excited for that. Also great to see people who've been really delivering strong performances for some time finally get their first Oscar nominations. Emily Blunt, Best Supporting Actress for Oppenheimer. Jeffrey Wright, Best Actor for American Fiction. It's really cool to finally see them get that recognition. Also, my boy Ryan Gosling getting Best Supporting Actor nomination for Barbie. Just an incredibly gifted actor, and so really great to see that. I don't have any, just no real big surprises, I don't think. Maybe a little bit like, America Ferrera picking up the nomination for Barbie, but nothing too crazy, I didn't think. My uneducated and unwarranted guess is that Oppenheimer is going to sweep Best Picture, Director, Actor for Cillian Murphy, and Supporting Actor for Robert Downey Jr. I think Actress is going to be probably a toss-up between Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon or Emma Stone for Poor Things. Obviously there's politics in all this in award ceremonies, and Stone already has an Oscar, but Poor Things really been coming on strong in the last few months, and that really just kind of leaves the Best Supporting Actress, which I have no idea who's going to win that. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to be between Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer or Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers, especially since Randolph got a lot of recognition for Dolomite Is My Name when that came out. But my guess is it'll be one of those two. But hey, cool to see, like I said, some of these people finally getting, Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. Well, Downey's been nominated before, but it's been a long time coming for him to win. I think this is good chance it's going to be his year. And then Murphy, again, another just incredibly gifted, talented actor who's never been nominated, and I feel confident he's going to take it. But so much for movies in the theaters and on the awards circuit. Let's take a look at movies coming out on physical media. Film Masters, who we've talked up much on this podcast, debuted a video on YouTube, which was a teaser of titles to come in 2024. And some were ones we already knew about, such as Tormented. but there were a couple that this was the first news on, and pretty exciting. Night of the Blood Beast, 1958, Roger Corman production. He did not direct it, but he and his brother Gene produced it. And this is a sci-fi horror hybrid with a plot that is very, very reminiscent of a much later movie, a little thing called Alien. It's about an astronaut who comes back from a mission and dies. His craft crashes and he's killed upon the impact of landing. And scientists retrieve his body and bring him to their laboratory, and they then come to find out that he is, although he appears by all accounts to be dead, he's actually still alive, and he's been infested with cells, alien cells, which are slowly growing and developing into new life forms inside his body. And as this is happening, a monstrous giant alien creature is roaming about the countryside in this isolated rural location, committing murder and mayhem. And it's definitely a really fun film. It was made by basically Corman and the director Bernard Kowalski, and the actors. They all did this, and then went on to do Attack of the Giant Leeches. That came out in '59, and it's one of a group of Corman-related movies from this time period, late 50s, mid-50s, early 60s, that has just been relegated to budget label releases. It's never really had a good DVD release or anything. And so it's really rewarding that Film Masters is going to tackle this one. I hope they do Giant Leeches too. That's another one that's really kind of languished. And some of the other Corman titles like Swamp Woman and Atlas. But really excited to see that this was featured in their coming attractions reel. And the other movie that caught my eye in the reel was from 1961, 5 Minutes to Live, which is a crime film starring none other than music legend Johnny Cash as a vicious, sadistic thug who, along with his buddies, have tried to pull off a bank robbery, and they ended up holding hostage the head of the bank's family, which includes a very young Ron Howard. And again, this is another title that's just only had like dollar DVD releases, never really anything of note. And last, have to absolutely give a shout out to the British, well, now it's both a British and a U.S. label, Indicator. They've done some excellent work with Mexican genre films in the past, and they're continuing that trend with their newest announcements of 3 Mexican films from the late 60s and early 70s. The Panther Women, The Bat Woman, and Santo versus the Riders of Terror. And really looking forward to checking these out. I know at least 2 of these, the Panther Women and the Batwoman, had U.S. releases that were really rough. They only had this really horrible English dub that was created for the film recently so that it could air on the El Rey network, and it was really poorly executed. And it just wasn't really. It was a really disappointing release that basically a lot of people like myself held off on. And now Indicator, which is, you hear the term the Criterion treatment, but for physical media labels that just pull out all the stops with extras and new transfers for movies, and now of course that term goes beyond Criterion because so many labels have rose to that level, if not surpassed it. And Indicator is definitely one of those boutique labels who just incredible releases, and so that they're the ones tackling this is especially pleasing, and really excited to see these. I'm outside of if I had to pick my favorite, if I could identify my favorite cinemas by nationality outside of America, Mexico would definitely be one of the top ones. I mean, I just love the sense of energy that's in the golden age Mexican horror movies, films like The Brainiac and the El Vampiro films and Curse of the Crying Woman, and they're incredibly entertaining, incredibly atmospheric, just jaw-droppingly stylish at times, even within the realm of having to sometimes work on lower budgets. Just incredible work there. So definitely stoked to see these. And along with Mexico, one of my favorite other national cinemas is Canada. Big fan of Canadian cinema. I'm pretty sure I mentioned that before. And we lost one of the truly great Canadian filmmakers this past week, although most of his career was spent outside of Canada, the career that we know of, is Norman Jewison, the great Academy Award-winning director. And his filmography is, put it simply, ridiculous. Just a list of the films he directed would include In the Heat of the Night, Fiddler on the Roof, Moonstruck, The Thomas Crown Affair, the original with Steve McQueen, Agnes of God, the original Rollerball with James Caan, and Justice for All, Jesus Christ Superstar, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, Soldier Story, The Cincinnati Kid, Send Me No Flowers, Fist with Sylvester Stallone, The Hurricane with Denzel Washington. I mean, just an incredible body of work. And of those, there's more than one film in his repertoire that I like, but In the Heat of the Night is one of those movies that's just deserves every inch of its reputation as a classic, and it's a film that continues to hold up to today. But it's interesting because he made these films like In the Heat of the Night and Agnes of God, movies that dealt with very very real social issues, but he also worked in musicals and he worked in comedy with like Moonstruck. And then if you go back to the beginning of his career as a studio director, he was doing, like I said, Send Me No Flowers, which was the last of the Rock Hudson Doris Day films. And he did The Thrill of It All and The Art of Love, which were two comedies with James Garner. And he did 40 Pounds of Trouble with Tony Curtis. And they were very much of that early mid-60s Universal comedy milieu where, just incredibly popping colors and a great sense of fun to those movies from that Universal put out in that era, their comedies. And The Art of Love, especially, if you get a chance to check it out, definitely kind of a comedy that kind of falls under the radar. It's a movie with James Garner and Dick Van Dyke, and Garner gets top billing because he was more the film star at that time. But it's really Van Dyke's show in that movie, and they play a couple friends over in France, and Van Dyke is an artist, and when it's mistakenly believed that he has died, which he hasn't, his art suddenly becomes more valuable. And Garner starts making all kinds of money off it, his buddy Garner. And then, of course, this leads to complications when they realize, well, in order to keep this going, we can't let anyone know that you're alive. So that's just, it's a very early film from Jewison, but definitely one that probably doesn't get sought out as much, and it's really, really enjoyable. But again, In the Heat of the Night, just incredible movie. Had a chance to see that at a local theater a few years back. They went through the entire list of AFI's 100 greatest movies and showed them all on the screen there. Got a chance to see it on the big screen at that point, but definitely check that out too if you haven't seen it. We also lost Michael Macready, age 91. Probably not a name that's really familiar to a lot of people by virtue of his name, but his work is known to horror fans. So he was the son of George Macready, who is one of the great character actors of 40s, 50s, and 60s cinema. He's probably best known for roles in such movies as the film noir The Big Clock, where he plays the right-hand man to the evil Charles Lawton character. And he was in Kubrick's Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas. He plays General Miro, the one who orders Kirk Douglas to take on the suicide mission that eventually leads to the trial at the heart of the movie. But Michael, his son, started out as an actor and pretty much just did guest shots, really. All he did is just, small roles on TV shows, The Danny Thomas Show, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Death Valley Days. And first of these he logged in 1958. So you get to 1969, and he teams up with another actor named Bob Keljan. Might be mispronouncing that name, hopefully not. And together they direct this movie called Flesh of My Flesh. And Keljan also wrote and starred in the movie, which I don't think there's any way to see the film. It's a drama about incest, so don't know how well that went over back then. But that was kind of the beginning of both those guys working behind the camera, because, like I said, they had both been actors before this. So in 1970, Keljan and Macready decided to team up and make a horror film, what originally was going to be a softcore horror film called The Loves of Count Iorga, Iorga, Vampire. And they got an actor by the name of Robert Quarry to play the titular vampire. And when he came on board, he's like, well, why are you doing this as like a softcore film? Just make it a straight horror movie. And that's the path they ended up taking. So Keljan directed the movie, and Macready produced and also played one of the kind of the male protagonist parts. And he was able to get his dad, George Macready, to provide the narration for the film, and it was retitled Count Yorga Vampire, and released by American National Pictures. It's an incredibly fun, really entertaining horror movie. It's great because it's basically set in like contemporary California setting, but with this, this character of Yorga, wonderfully played by Corey, who's has his gothic trappings going on in his large estate, and just a really great cast all around. Roger Perry is in it too, and Michael Murphy, two actors who I'm a big fan of, and Donna Anders, an actress who don't think she really did a lot, but she was in this and another horror movie called Werewolves on Wheels, both of which I'm a big fan of. And the film did well enough that the next year, 1971, they were able to do a sequel, appropriately titled The Return of Count Yorga. And again, Keljan directed and Macready produced. He also has a really small walk-on part in the movie. There were talks about doing a third movie, which would have potentially teamed up the Count Yorga character with Dr. Phibes, the Vincent Price character who had appeared in two films also made by AIP in the early 70s. And my understanding is that the films were not successful enough, the second films in each of these franchises, to generate interest in a third one. I've also read that Corey went and made a horror movie called The Death Master around this time, and according to Corey, Michael Macready was kind of pissed off that he did that because he felt like he was basically trying to make a Count Yorga film that just didn't have the name Yorga in it. But be that as it may, that was 1971 when the second one came out, and then in 1972, I should also point out that in the second movie, the second Yorga film, George Macready, Michael's dad, actually appeared in the film, and that was his last film role he ever did. But 1972, Macready goes one more time into the horror genre, not with Bob Keljan this time, but with another director named Bud Townsend, and they make a movie called Terror at Red Wolf Inn. Again, Macready produces it. He has the supporting role as the sheriff. It's got quite a bit of cult status because it is a pre-Texas Chainsaw Massacre cannibalism film. And again, another movie that's unfortunately been relegated to budget label hell. You have to just kind of satisfy yourself with these murky transfers on 50 movie packs. There was supposed to get a full-blown restoration several years ago from Code Red, and there was a big hang-up with the elements and accessing the elements, unfortunately. Hopefully someone will pick up that ball and get that across the line, because it is an enjoyable film, enjoyable horror movie. But that was it for Michael Macready's work behind the camera and work in the horror genre. In fact, if you check out his credits, the only thing he ever did after Terror at Red Wolf Inn, which was 1972, is that he has a very small part in the 1978 TV movie Rescue from Gilligan's Island. And that's it. In terms of working behind the camera, in terms of acting, don't know what happened, if he just what field he pursued. I tried to find some information about him. I couldn't really find anything to say what happened to him after that. But what he left behind is definitely very thankful for. Yorga, AIP product in the 70s. I think Yorga is my favorite of the American National Pictures movies of the 70s. I really enjoy those two films. They have also, the cool thing about the Yorga movies too is that they're horror movies, but they have a really great sense of humor in them. And horror comedies can be tough because if they're successful at being funny, it kind of kills the effectiveness of the horror part. Roger Corman likes to mix horror with comedy, and he really successfully did that with, A Bucket of Blood and Little Shop of Horrors. But sometimes I felt like his whole theory, which I've heard him talk about a lot, that you need to constantly balance horror with comedy. I'm like, I get what he's saying, but it can be really tricky because, a lot of times if you have to choose between horror and comedy, a lot of times it's easy just to go for the comedy and, to focus on that and try to deliver the goods on that at the expense of the horror and taking away from the ability of the film to provide chills. And the thing about the Yorga movies is they have this great sense of humor to them that does not dilute the horror elements. It really blends in well. And it's a very unique brand of humor that they showcase. And the actors in it, like Roger Perry, are actors who are great at both being more traditional dramatic parts, leading men, but they also are actors who are very talented in comedic bits, so they know how to walk that line between those two genres and make them work together well. So definitely check out the Yorga movies if you have not seen them. Now, going back to Mexican cinema again, which we were just talking about, we lost Gaston Santos. And he was age 92, and he was actually he had left a very strong mark in Mexican cinema. But what he was best known for in his career wise was that he was a rejoneador, or which is another word for a horse mounted bullfighter, and he had international success in that field, and it's such that by the time the late 50s, early 60s came around, he's actually able to launch a film career, an acting career, a good 15-year-ish run as a leading man too, not just like cameos or bit parts based off his celebrity. Like he's a legit movie star for that time period, and did a lot of westerns. But he also starred in two really beloved Mexican horror movies, The Black Pit of Dr. M and The Living Coffin. And then sometime like late 60s, early 70s, he basically returned to his main career path, but had to note that he passed on because those are two of the better known Mexican horror movies of that era. And lastly, one very close to my childhood is that we lost actress Noreen Virgin, who is 77, Canadian actress, who was the star of the children's show Today Special, which had a good run throughout the 80s. And it was a Canadian show, but it aired in the States here. And while many people of my era grew up on Sesame Street as their PBS-style entertainment, I was over watching Today's Special. It just had a great sense of imagination, fun to it. It was about basically a department store, and at night it's closed up and no one's there. And Noreen Virgin, she played this character named Jody who worked at the store. And in the store there was a mannequin named Jeff who, when the store closed and he put his hat on, he came to life. And then there were two Muppet-like characters. There was a mouse and then a security guard. And it just had a great sense of fantasy and imagination to it. It was something that I really, really, really enjoyed when I was in like my early single digits years. And so to see that she passed really sucks, because that was, again, such a foundational part of my childhood. But she had a really incredible career. So, she did act in a number of TV movies and guest spots on other shows. She had a recurring role on the long-running Canadian show Police Surgeon, but really eventually got into broadcast journalism is really where she ended up going, and then eventually became an educator and activist for Black history and Black rights in Canada. She did a lot to educate people about the history of Black people in her country, and really sad to see her pass on. All right, now we are to that wonderful part of the episode where we discuss the movie of the week, and this was a first-time watch for me from 1987, Barbra Streisand in Nuts. And in this film, Babs plays Claudia, a high-class call girl who has been arrested and charged with having murdered one of her clientele, played by Leslie Nielsen. And when the film opens up, she is about to be arraigned in court, and her family, her parents, played by Carl Malden and Maureen Stapleton, they want her lawyer to basically have it set up so that she's ruled incompetent to stand trial, so that she just gets put into a psychiatric facility indefinitely and just is treated that way without having to go through a trial or the criminal process. And because Carl Malden's character has some connections, the district attorney's on board with going along with that. But the problem is that Streisand, she feels that she is not guilty of the charges against her, and she doesn't want to be just institutionalized. She wants to actually have her day in court and be able to prove that she's, should not be held criminally responsible. But her behavior is so belligerent and so aggressive that the court psychiatrist, played by Eli Wallach, feels that she is not competent to stand trial, and because everybody's basically of that viewpoint, no one's really taking her outlook on this into consideration. And so during the arraignment, she ends up punching out her lawyer, and the judge, because the lawyer obviously will not represent her anymore, decides to have a public defender who just happens to be in court at that moment, played by the great Richard Dreyfuss, appointed as her attorney. And Dreyfuss, being kind of an outsider to what's going on with Claudia and her history and her family and what their concerns are, he's really just focused on doing what his client wants him to do. So he agrees with many reservations because Claudia is such a difficult person. Streisand's character is such a difficult person to interact with. He agrees, though, to represent her viewpoint on this matter and to push to get her ruled competent to stand trial, and so that she can actually have her day in court. So this is it's a courtroom movie, but where the proceedings are not about guilty or innocent of the actual crime. The courtroom drama that unfolds is about whether or not Streisand's character can even stand trial and whether or not she's competent. And I would say that it's really interesting about this film because the thing that really roots you into this film is, as may have been implied by some of the people I've mentioned, is the cast. It is an incredible cast of A+++ actors. Many of them in their older years, actors whose careers go back to the 40s even, but still absolutely at the top of their game. It's just a masterful opportunity to watch just some of the greatest performers all congregated into one cast. So aside from Dreyfuss, who is just so excellent and does such a great job of creating this this really three-dimensional character, but he does it with nuance. He never plays big, but it's just very relatable. It's a very realistic character of this public defender who really does, want to represent Streisand's best interest, but also finds her incredibly aggravating to deal with and finds the whole situation frustrating. It's a situation he didn't even want to be in the first place. He was just chosen for this task. You've got Malden and Stapleton, two Oscar winners, as the parents. Wallach, of course, and then the Ugly of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, another legendary character actress, the psychiatrist, the judge in the film, proceeding over the trial, is James Whitmore, the great James Whitmore, two-time Oscar nominee. And this is kind of before. It's interesting because this was Malden's last theatrically released movie. He still did some TV movies and some guest spots. And for Stapleton and Wallach, they still had a bit left in their careers, still left to go. But for Whitmore, even though he had this incredible career already, everyone is very familiar to audiences. 40-some-year career, films like Oklahoma and The Asphalt Jungle, and Them, the classic science fiction movie. This was before he kind of became recognized by a whole new generation with his role in The Shawshank Redemption. And playing the district attorney in the film is another great character actor, Robert Webber, who fans of that mid-50s, mid-70s cinema will be very familiar with. He's one of the jurors in 12 Angry Men. He was in Robert Aldrich's The Dirty Dozen, Harper with Paul Newman, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. And this would actually be his last film. Sadly, he passed away just 2 years after this film from Lou Gehrig's disease. But he's the district attorney in the movie. And I think of all of these... they're all again incredible actors, incredible performances. Dreyfuss's performance, I think, is one of the most memorable in the film. But really, you have to, I think, maybe even just edging him out a little is Whitmore as the judge. He does so much with so little in this film. If you just watch his performance. Again, it's a great thing about these casts is that they've been around so long. They have such expertise. They know how to not overplay their parts because it's a courtroom film. So, a lot of times there are opportunities in those types of movies to really ham it up, to really kind of, go to the back row in a courtroom film. A lot of opportunities for histrionics. But these cast members underplay it while imbuing their parts with such realism and such nuance. So Whitmore, if you watch his performance in this film, even when he's not the focus of attention, when he's just in the background while someone's testifying, just watch him. Watch the way he moves his hands. Watch the little things he does that just really breathe a life into his character. Huge shout out though to Leslie Nielsen, who's part as we watch the film, basically we start to get a glimpse into Streisand's backstory, what kind of led her to becoming this call girl, this prostitute, despite coming from an affluent family, and we start to see bits and pieces of the murder played to us. And Nielsen, a lot of people may not be aware of where this was in the trajectory of his career, but Nielsen, he was, when he started out, he was like a traditional leading man back in the 50s and stuff. I mean, he was in Tammy and the Bachelor with Debbie Reynolds and Forbidden Planet, the great science fiction movie, and going into the 60s, popping up in a lot of TV shows, Columbo and Hawaii Five-0, and of course he's the captain in the Poseidon Adventure. He was someone who, even when he never quite could totally cement himself as a bankable leading man, it seemed like. Because even in some of those more high-profile movies like Tammy and Forbidden Planet, Tammy, it's Debbie Reynolds' vehicle. And Forbidden Planet, it's the special effects in the spectacle of the movie. And it seemed as time went on, he was still able to get leading parts in lower-tier movies. And there were attempts for him to kind of get his own TV series, but it just never totally seemed to click for him. And then, of course, 1980, Airplane comes out, and he's one of that group of actors with Robert Stack and Lloyd Bridges and Peter Graves, who just has such success, lampooning the kind of roles they were known for. The film was a huge hit. And then the makers of that movie, they did the TV series Police Squad and brought him on for that. And it had a cult following, even though it didn't last very long. And at this point, Nuts was basically the last movie he did before getting the call that, okay, we're going to take Police Squad and we're going to make that into a movie, The Naked Gun. And pretty much from then till the end of his career, the end of his life, those next 20 or some years, whatever it was, he totally reinvented himself as this incredibly successful, incredibly talented, gifted, popular comedic actor. And people who grew up on those films, the Naked Gun movies and Mr. Magoo and Spy Hard and all those, had no, it's probably difficult for them to even have a concept of him as a leading man or as a dramatic actor. But in Nuts, he's incredible. He really is a very frightening, imposing person. Streisand talked about just, how terrified she was of him, not because of Nielsen himself, but just his performance, and that it was really effective. And it's just a great reminder of, his talent and what he could bring. It kind of gives you mixed feelings because on one hand, you're like, oh man, I wish he had just been more recognized for this kind of ability and had been able to go further with this, and that this had been the stepping off point to a highly regarded career and more dramatic and character driven parts. But then the other side of that is, hey, the guy had paid his dues. He'd been around for 35 years, and he was able to finally get that star success status as a comedic actor. And yes, that's what he was known for the rest of his career. But hey, as long as he was happy, he finally, was able to reap what he had sown all those years. More power to him. But a terrific performance, absolutely terrific performance. Which then brings us to Streisand. So Streisand, no surprise, Streisand was someone who's very much took creative control of the projects she had, and this was her baby for sure. Her performance is good, absolutely is a good performance. But the problem with it is that it's her character, and it's one of the big flaws with this movie, is that Claudia, her situation that she's on trial for, which is whether or not she's competent, the outcome never seems in doubt. The film just does not, and it's a big problem with the film, it does not really ever sell to you that the outcome is in jeopardy. It shows a Claudia as this person who's very sarcastic, very outspoken, very brash, and yes, prone to outbursts of anger. But she's being, faced with the dilemma of being actually ruled mentally incompetent to even assist her own defense, to even go to trial. And her behavior, though one might find it aggressive or annoying or difficult to deal with, the film never is able to really sell to you the stakes that, this behavior actually goes to the level where someone might think she's, needs to be institutionalized. It never really rises to that level. And compounding that problem is that her character, to be honest, just isn't that interesting. It's we do find out a little, like I said, a little bit more about her as the trial unfolds. We find out more about what made her who she is, but there's still not a lot of depth to the character. I mean, it's a character that we've seen in a lot of other movies. It's not. I wouldn't say there's anything too groundbreaking or really revelatory about this character of Claudia that we haven't ever experienced before in cinema. And so this film, it's built around this character who is A, not terribly engrossing, and then B, going up against a situation that we never really feel she's in peril about. And that's what kind of makes viewing this film so interesting because if you were to ask me, hey, was that a good movie? I'd be like, well, I don't know if I can go that far because the center of the film is a character that doesn't really pull you in, faced with a plight that never feels makes you feel like she's in jeopardy. But yeah, although I might not be able to say that's a good movie. This is a good movie. I also just found the experience of watching it so rewarding because it has this cast all in one production under one roof. And just to watch them at work, it's great. It's just great to see them. I mean, it's a tremendous exercise to show someone like if you wanted to show someone acting like just acting at its greatness, at acting at its peak. Actors who are able to underplay things and yet totally wrap you up into their performance. This is a wonderful film to choose to demonstrate that. But like I said, it's at the same time beyond that. It is difficult to recommend for the story. It's it's not a film I can recommend for the drama at the heart of it, which isn't ideal when you have a courtroom drama, right? You want, hey, come see this movie, and it's a trial drama. It's built around one character facing an outcome that will have a huge impact on the rest of her life, all set within the framework of a judicial proceeding. And you're like, oh man, I want to check this out because the thing that those kind of movies usually do is they build the suspense about what's going to happen at the end, and they get you wrapped up into the play of their protagonist. And this film does neither of those things. It completely blows it on two of the points that people most come to recognize this type of film for. But again, because you have all these great players in it, you still find the experience of watching it incredibly rewarding. I think the first half, the first like 60-65% that's really the strong point because that's where you get to see a lot of these actors, for example, Carl Malden and Maureen Stapleton, having to testify, and you get to see the mechanics of Richard Dreyfuss prepping the case. So it gives all those supporting players and characters time to shine. And then as the film progresses, it becomes more Streisand centric. She has quite a lengthy scene where she's testifying, and it feels a bit long. If it's a bit much, it starts to that's a moment where it starts to almost feel a bit stagey. Which this was based on a play, and that was written by Tom Topor, and originally premiered in 1979. It was off Broadway, and part of the process of this movie making its way to the big screen was that Universal Studios originally purchased the film rights and financed the play's move to Broadway. And Anne Toomey played the part of Claudia on stage and actually got a Tony nomination for that. But yeah, so the film, it is a great deal of it set in the courtroom. So some bits, in the lockup areas and in the medical wards, but a good deal of it does take place in the courtroom, and it doesn't really feel theatrical though until you get to that kind of long, almost monologue-like part where we just have Streisand testifying, and there's some interaction with the DA at that point, and it does feel like at that point the cumulative weight of the problems I mentioned, her character being somewhat less than involving, her situation not feeling dire enough. That's where the weight of it really starts to kind of catch up, and the film starts to meet its struggles and becomes a little bit sluggish at that point. Interestingly, when the plan was originally made to make this into a movie, it was Mark Rydell was attached to direct it, and he still with us, but Academy Award nominated director, known for such movies as On Golden Pond. He had done The Cowboys with John Wayne, The Reavers with Steve McQueen at this point. He had done Cinderella Liberty with James Caan. He had done The Rose with Bette Midler. And so he was brought on board to direct it, and it was going to actually star Deborah Winger originally. And even at that point, because this was around 1982, Streisand has expressed interest in starring in this, but she was still working on Yentl, and Rydell did not want to have to wait on things, so he was going to move forward with Winger. And should note that because of the subject nature of this film and some of the I can't say too much because I don't want to reveal any plot spoilers, but it was kind of controversial at the time for the studios. They were kind of concerned about how it would be received. So just something to kind of keep in mind as they were going to move forward with making this film. And so, Universal kind of had a little bit of cold feet, and they eventually sold the entire project over to Warner Brothers. And things got rolling again around 1986. Streisand got signed on to do the movie. She got signed on for $5 million plus a percentage of the profits. But Rydell and Tom Topper, the playwright, who was also credited with co-writing the script, they were just butting heads at this point and just really not seeing eye to eye on things. And so Rydell ended up leaving, which coincidentally, he was one of the original directors hired to do A Star is Born with Streisand and had also left that film. And then Streisand ended up being able to secure Martin Ritt, which this would be Ritt's penultimate movie, his next to last film. And Ritt had an incredibly long career, really known for his work with actors, having directed numerous Academy Award-winning and nominated performances. And he had directed such films as HUD and Norma Ray and Sounder and The Front, The Long Hot Summer, and Edge of the City with Cassavetes and Poitier. And so just this incredibly well-respected, highly esteemed filmmaker. But going back just a little bit, I think it would be interesting to see Winger in this role. I think the fact that she was more than a dozen years younger than Streisand would have really helped. I think that Streisand's is kind of pushing it a little bit age-wise to play this character. And part of that's the problem. It's not just that she's too old to play the character, but it's also the way they present the character. In the scenes we see of her, for example, interacting with Leslie Nielsen, which from the narrative of the film are flashback scenes. As the film story unfolds and we kind of get flashes back to how she met up with Leslie Nielsen and what unfolded before them, she really seems like a totally competent, highly functioning individual. And so there's really no... the transition from that to her being this completely unleashed, wild, belligerent person, it seems to go from 0 to 60. And the film does have, again, I can't go into spoiler territory, it does kind of give some, offerings as to why such a sharp transition could happen, but it never really sells that idea. I almost feel like this film would have been better off structurally if they had actually just totally gotten rid of the whole going back and forth in time thing and just started it out with us spending time with Streisand as a call girl, going into the whole meeting with Nielsen and what happens there in chronological order. And so that we can see, it would be more impactful and more believable to actually see the process unfold of her going through this really violent encounter and that kind of triggering this explosive emotional breakdown. But instead we kind of see her when she's already at when she's at 11 out of 10, and then we have to kind of go back and see clips of her, acting in a more stable way. I mean, the whole thing just undermines the believability of her character. She just comes across, which goes to the point I was making earlier. It undermines her plight. We're supposed to, believe that she could really be in this situation where she could be institutionalized, and because she's coming across like she's mentally incompetent. But instead, because of the way things unfold in the film, the way they present it, we as an audience see it and we think, well, no, she's not. She doesn't even remotely come across like she's incompetent. She comes across like someone who had this, really traumatic experience, and it's also just someone who's probably kind of a a bit of a wise ass in person anyways. And so she's just kind of bucking against the system because they're not really hearing her out on what really happened between her and Leslie Nielsen. So we're left with this really wildly uneven portrayal of this character where we start off by seeing her, like I said, as kind of this high energy smartass. Then we're led to believe, the film tries to make us believe that this isn't just her being a smartass. She could be mentally incompetent. That's something we're really supposed to believe, that she could be ruled as that. And then the film goes back in time to show us as her, like I said, as a totally put together, functioning, normal person, which seems completely 180 from what we've seen before. And from all this, we're supposed to pull this picture of this totally cohesive, three-dimensional character, and it doesn't work. None of that comes together. And I think that if Winger had been in the part, I think that she could have found the nuance in that better. Maybe I think I could see Winger creating moments that maybe weren't there originally, which isn't to say that Streisand doesn't have the ability, but I just can see someone like Winger having that ability to kind of create moments to kind of better show the transition of this character from, functioning to explosive to potentially believably unhinged and just, like I said, mentally incompetent. I think she could have brought those different vibes to it. And I think that being a little younger, having this character be a little younger, I think it would make her character more believable. And part of that's because of things that you learn about in the film that I can't give away because again, it kind of go into spoiler. But the idea is, she comes from, like I said, she comes from this successful, affluent family. And what is it that made her go from that to becoming a prostitute? Well, if she's younger in the film, if the character is younger, like Deborah Winger age, like 30, she would have been like 32, I think, in around this time, whereas Streisand was like mid 40s. If she's younger, then the journey from being this young person in this affable family environment, in this financially well-off environment, the time period between that and being a high-end call girl, it's shorter, right? It's more condensed because obviously she's younger, so it's been less time since she left the home and has gone through the experience she's gone through that eventually led her to becoming this prostitute. And so that, because it's less time has taken place, in that journey, then it makes it more believable that she could have such a raw, contentious reaction to the violent situation with Leslie Nielsen. It makes it more believable that such an incident could really push her emotionally to the edge. And the increased believability of that, of course, then makes us buy more into the idea of her truly being in jeopardy through this trial, that she really could be institutionalized. But because Streisand's a decade older than her, then she just comes across so much more stable and established, especially in these, like I said, these flashbacks to her, showing her going about just her daily life and, meeting up with Leslie Nielsen and stuff. And so because we see her as this older, more established person who kind of has her act together and just the way she handles her day-to-day life, and because we're not seeing in real time her experience the trauma of the violence with Leslie Nielsen, then the idea of her going from this cool, calm, professional person to this belligerent a-hole, it just seems more unbelievable and hard to swallow. And again, I don't want any of this to come across like it's a criticism of Streisand. I don't think. I think that even if you had Winger in the part, you'd still have a cliched nature to this character. But I think it would have just benefited from a younger person, a person more of Winger's vibe. I think that would have probably been better. It would have. The only thing the downside to Winger being in it is, I feel like Stapleton and Malden would have probably come across as too old to be her parents. Not that they are would be too old to be Winger's parents if you look at when everyone's born and everything, but Winger just always projected more youth than she had, because this is around the time she did like Black Widow, which I saw like a year or so ago. It's a fun suspense film, Bob Rafelson movie, her versus Teresa Russell. And she's definitely someone who always just seems a lot younger than she is. And then you put that with Carl Malden and Maureen Stapleton, who are that generation that always looks a lot older than they are. Yeah, you might have, I don't know, that could have maybe required some shifting around to some of the supporting parts. Interesting thing is that the Dreyfus role, he was originally set to play the role, then ended up changing his mind. He went over to do the Barry Levinson movie Tin Men. And eventually, obviously, he did end up in the role. But in between, you look at some of the actors who were considered to play the part, and Dustin Hoffman was kind of like a front runner, and was ready to go in for it, but his salary was too high for them to go for. And then, according to contemporary news pieces of the time, Paul Newman, Al Pacino, and Marlon Brando were all considered. I don't know if that's just nonsense, publicity of the time, but those were some of the people being considered for the part. I definitely think that Dreyfus was the way to go for absolutely, because especially like Newman. I mean, I love Paul Newman, but this is just coming just a few years after the verdict, and maybe that's what they were kind of thinking with Pacino too, was because this is just a few years after Injustice for All, that those would be kind of good guys for this part. But I definitely think that Dreyfus was the right choice, definitely compared to even Hoffman. Again, great actor, but not right for this part. Brando would have been interesting. I think Brando in anything would have been interesting, to say the least. Dreyfus still the right choice, even above Brando, but I would like to see whatever that was that Brando would have done with this part, for sure. I have Carl Malden's autobiography here. I picked it up at a sale a few months back, and so I was kind of looking at what he wrote about this experience. And it seemed like he had a really good time doing it. It was interesting, his perspective, because Streisand, she was one of those people who really took control over her productions, and so she had him like read for the part, and she wanted him to meet him, and that was really something that Malden found a little, unusual at this point in his career, having already won the Oscar and everything, to have to read for a part. But he went along with it, and he spoke about, basically for him, it's like old home week, working again with people like Wallach and Stapleton, who he knew from way back, and they had this thing where if one of them was sitting in the audience in the courtroom and one was on the stand, and they were filming a scene where one person was testifying, they would kind of rely on each other, so that if, say, Carl Malden was on the stand and Eli Wallach was in the audience, and Eli Wallach felt like Carl Malden should probably do one more take, he would kind of like signal. They'd signal to each other, and then the actor could be like, I want to do one more. Just, it was this kind of rapport they had built with each other over the years, where they could rely on each other to kind of see how their performance was coming across and coach each other without it being something that was obvious to the filmmakers and the people around. And that way it gave them an opportunity to, if they felt like they had to go for another take or wanted to try something different. But that was pretty interesting to read about this. Like I said, yeah, this was Malden's last theatrically released movie. He still, like I said, did some TV movies and was still around for quite a while after this, but this was the last movie in theaters he was ever in. Film ended up getting several Golden Globe nominations for Best Drama, and Streisand was nominated for Best Actress in a Drama, and then Dreyfus for Best Supporting Actor. But ended up, box office-wise, had a budget of $25 million and box office of 31. So I don't know if that includes, if that's just the initial theatrical run. Obviously, that's not the kind of profit you want. Just $6 million off a $25 million investment, I'm guessing. But still, a film that, generally speaking, is well regarded. The film was released on DVD by Warner, and pretty affordable if you get a chance to check it out. Has a commentary track too with Streisand. I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but definitely want to dive into that at some point. An older transfer for sure on the DVD. It's the right aspect ratio and everything. It's good to go, but hopefully they'll get around to getting this on Blu-ray at some point. But again, not a movie I would say put the stamp of the seal of approval on, in terms of it meeting all the goals it set out to meet. It does not achieve that. It does not bring you into the center of its courtroom dynamics and drama, and make you, hold you with rapt attention about what's going to happen to Streisand's character, and and make you really concerned about her and her play. It does not do that, and it should be able to do that because that's kind of what a courtroom drama is. Kind of one of the things its goals. But at the same time, just for this incredible gallery of actors all under the same roof, all totally nailing it, it's absolutely something for that. For those reasons alone, that I recommend it for, just to see the acting craft at work. Also, I must take issue with the last scene in the movie. Not the outcome of the movie, not the outcome of the courtroom proceedings, but the actual last scene. Wasn't sure about that. Don't think that's how that works. You'll know what I mean when you watch it. but hey, what can I say? But yeah, nuts. 1987. Picked this up actually at a garage sale. It's a movie that's been on my radar for some time, and it was this, not this past summer. I don't think it was the summer before. I picked up two Barbra Streisand movies I had wanted to watch for some time and just had never gotten around to getting. This one and Up the Sandbox, which is a movie she did in the 70s, which is kind of one of her lesser known films, but it sounds really interesting. So hopefully I'll get around to that too. I'm a little behind on my Streisandology, but definitely want to dive more into that. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's episode of Carpet City Cinema. Thank you very much for tuning in. And please continue to give us all the love possible by ways of sharing our social media posts and following us on social media, and whatever platform you're listening to us on. Give us the best possible review that platform allows. But until next week, thank you for tuning in and take care.